Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Autist Circle, episode 16, Grant Wood. I am, as always, and apparently today, uh, mindless, the Bleach Demon, and joined, as always, by the man with the knowledge, Fat Dave, also known as TotalBlackoutPainting.
Hello, thank you. Today we are taking a bit of a change from the. We're moving into more modern times with Grant Wood, who was an American regionalist painter. And so we'll talk a little bit about what regionalism is, and we'll talk about his interesting but short life. And first and foremost, we'll jump over to the art timeline, our regular art timeline. So we can see Grant Wood was born in 1890, and he died in 1942, or 1891, died in 1942. He lived through the Depression, and also he lived through World War One, and ended up serving in World War One in a brief capacity, and really kind of died before World War II ramped up. So he lived through an interesting time in American history. And I think what we'll see here is that a lot of his work and the sentiment around his work was kind of a reaction to the New Deal style politics at the time and the culture. So let me read my blurb here. So Grant Wood's style is referred to as regionalism, although he dabbled in post-impressionism and other styles before that. And while he was a child during World War I, he was not immune to the repercussions of the war. His art is a product of Depression-era America in the 1930s. He's from the heartland of America, and his work reflects that kind of anti-modernist sentiment of his home. But his work is not entirely anti-modernist. Regionalism is a counterweight to European and New York cosmopolitan-centered abstraction. Think of like Dali and the Surrealists and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a modern artist, and he's using older forms to build his works, focusing on the American mythos using rural and small-town local subjects. So his mature works are influenced by his European training. After studying in Munich, where he studied many Northern European artists, it pulled him away from the world of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism towards a much more polished and detailed style. So after the great explosion of European modernism, he does not follow it towards abstraction, and instead he turns the Midwest into a stage for American identity. And with Grant Wood, we are leaving the salons and the posters and the glittering surfaces of Europe and moving to the American Midwest. Wood gives us America donning a costume of a pitchfork, a farmhouse, a patriotic society, a founding myth, and an old sentimental song. So, with that, we'll just jump right into the biography here.
Yeah, and wasn't he like from Iowa, which is the most Midwestern state of all?
Yeah, the middest western of Midwestern states, totally. Yeah, and his life revolved around Iowa. His whole life did. He spent almost all of his time there when he wasn't in Europe. He spent most of his time in Iowa. And he was born there. So it's a small town Iowa too. So let's jump in here. So Grant DeVolson Wood was born on February 13th in 1891 on a farm near Anamosa, Iowa. His father was Francis Maryville Wood, and his mother was Hattie DeEtta Weaver Wood. His father died in 1901 when he was just 10, and his mother moved the city to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was a large town at this time. I mean, it's a big town now, but it was one of the bigger towns in Iowa at the time. So in Cedar Rapids, his talent became apparent early on. He won his first art contest in 1905 with a colored drawing of oak leaves submitted to a national Crayola competition. So of course Crayola, the crayon company, yeah.
Holy shit, that's kind of wild.
And I was trying to find a picture of it, but I couldn't find a picture of it to put in the presentation. So,
Hmm.
um, but that's from all this information is sourced from several biographical pages on him, not exclusively Wikipedia, because a lot of there's, yeah, we'll get into that more later because there's a lot of weird speculation around him in his later life. So,
Hmm.
in Cedar Rapids, his teachers encouraged his talents. At Washington High School, he worked with his friend and fellow burgeoning artist Marvin Cohn, who painted this picture here. They
Hmm.
painted scenery for school plays and illustrating public school publications. And while at school, he not only trained as a painter, but he taught himself jewelry making, copperware, ornamental lighting, and furniture design as well, which is interesting because it tells you how much high school has changed.
Yeah. Wow. To,
Because,
to think if I'd been able to do half of that back when I was in high school, I
right?
may not have decided to hate and shun all those people to this day.
Right. Yeah, the breadth and depth of what they were able to teach in older high schools was really quite astounding, and I think that's why a lot of them taught Latin. You know, so many people learned Latin back in the day and stuff like that. Shit we
Hmm.
just don't have now. But he was really able to take advantage of it. Um, and I also think that it's because of a lot of the teachers back then were artisans. They were craftsmen. You know,
Hmm.
now we have people that go to school to teach, and back then they sought out people who were knowledgeable to teach. So it's a little bit of a cart before the horse kind of thing. But after graduating in 1910, he studied at the School of Design and Handicraft and Normal Art in Minneapolis, and that's also known as the Handicraft Guild, which was in this building here, which is now, of course, you can see a hardware store. Um,
I'm just thinking, man, I really need a new washer and dryer from GE.
He was there for a few summers, and then he moved on to the School of Art Institute in Chicago in 1913. And he studied there until 1916, when financial pressure made him return to his home in Cedar Rapids.
Hmm.
So, near the end of World War I, he joined the Army, where he painted camouflage on vehicles as well as other art for the Army.
Hmm.
And he was only in there for one hitch, it was pretty brief. And at the end of the war, from 1919 to 1925, he taught at a junior high in Cedar Rapids, in the Cedar Rapids public school system. And the seasonal nature of his teaching allowed him to take trips to Europe in the summer. And between 1920 and 1928, he made a total of 4 trips abroad. In 1920, he traveled to Paris with his friend Marvin Cohn, the same guy, and This is another Marvin Cohn painting. This is called cloud
Huh.
painting. Um, this is descriptively called cloud painting. This is from 1934, which I think is a really cool
I'm,
painting.
I'm just gonna say, I think Marvin Cohn may have to get slotted into the rotation.
Yeah, maybe. Because yeah, he had a really amazing style. His second trip was from 1923 to 1924, during which he took a leave of absence from his job to spend the entire year studying in Europe. And he studied at the Académie Julienne, which we've talked about before, and he traveled to Sorrento, Italy. And towards the end of his stay, a gallery agreed to hold an exhibition of his artwork in the summer of 1926, but it did not receive the attention he had hoped for. And in 1928, he traveled to Munich. While there, he studied the works of Hans Memling, who painted this painting here. And this is called Earthly Vanity and Divine Salvation from 1485. So, this is a North European Renaissance artist. And he studied other 15th and 16th century North European artists. And that experience helped push him away from the loose impressionistic handling and towards a hard, polished, sharply detailed style that would define his mature work. So by the end of the 20s, Grant was no longer trying to become a European artist. He was preparing to become something better, an American artist using European precision to turn his home into a mythic place. So, this painting is called Woman with Plants. This is a portrait of his mother. And this type of plant, I think it's called a snake plant, is a recurring theme in some of his works. So, after his return to America after Europe, Wood's art is transformed into something different from his previous works. His works become something uniquely his and uniquely American. And this is where Wood begins to construct the American regionalist style. So, a little brief aside about regionalism here. It's an American modern art movement that depicted realistic scenes of rural and small town America. And it falls under the same umbrella as urban realism. And the style of American regionalism is really defined by three distinct artists. Of course, Grant Wood, along with Thomas Hart Benson, who painted this. This is New York, early 20s from 1924. And John Stewart Curry, which this is his painting, and this is Tornado Over Canvas. And they believed that the solution to urban problems in American life and the Great Depression was for the United States to return to its rural and agricultural roots. So by 1929, Grant begins arranging people, clothing, plants, and backgrounds into staged symbolic portraits. And by 1930, Grant Wood moved from the farm after his father died. He moved to the city, became a craftsman, chased Europe, failed to become a Parisian modernist, discovered Northern Renaissance precision in Munich, and then returned to Iowa with the tools to turn the Midwest into theater. And with that, we're going to move on to his most famous painting and one of the most famous American paintings of all time. And hey, we got Bezic in here.
Oh, somebody's still awake.
And this, of course, is American Gothic, painted in 1930. It's oil on beaver board, and it measures 30.75 by 25.75 inches, or 78 by 65.3 centimeters, and is currently located at the Art Institute of Chicago. And of course, this is one of the most iconic American paintings, and it's the reason I really decided to cover Wood. Because much like Leutz and Bierstadt and Russell, this work is such an iconic and purely American work that its image can't be separated from the American identity. It represents a straightforward portrait of Midwestern severity, two unsmiling people, a pitchfork and a white farmhouse, and a pointed Gothic window. But the more you look at the painting, the more it becomes clear that Wood is not simply documenting rural life. He is constructing an American image. And the couple is constructed as well as the scene. The woman is Nan Woods Graham, who is Wood's sister, and his dentist, his family dentist, which was Dr. B.H. McKeeby. They were the models. And they didn't pose in front of the house. They posed individually. Excuse me. And he constructed the image afterwards. And the now famous house is in Eldon, Iowa. Grant sketched the house and used it as the foundation for the painting. And the house really was the inspiration for the painting, because Wood, he saw the house and he endeavored to paint the house along with, quote, the kind of people fancied should live in that house. His words. The composition of the painting is incredibly tight, and the Gothic window is echoed by the two figures standing side by side. The the pitchfork repeats the same pointed vertical logic of the window, and the pitchfork shape in the stitching of the man's overalls. You can see that right in the front here.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't notice that until it was pointed out. I was like, oh, yeah, totally. There's like a pitchfork right in the front of his overalls. Um, and his shirt has the same vertical lines. And then the house has the same vertical lines as well. The siding on the house
Mm-hmm.
and on the barn in the back there too.
Well, just another thing, the curtain in the window
Mm-hmm.
is vaguely mimicked by the woman's dress or house coat or whatever it is
Yeah,
over her dress.
yeah, very much so. So the painting, it is. It's the curtain is mirrored in her dress, and it kind of goes to the repeating elements within the painting.
Hmm.
The and the plants on the porch in the back, which are back here, they echo back to the painting of his mother. Let's see if zoom in. Yeah, you can see the snake plant in the back, which is
Oh yeah,
similar to the one his mom was holding, and that woman with
yeah,
plants.
and that other fern-like plant that was also in the painting of his mother. And I just
Yeah,
realized I pointed out exactly what you'd written down.
yeah, yeah. That was
Here, I thought I
brilliant.
was being clever.
So it's really, you can see the construction of the scene to make it all work and work harmoniously as one painting. And this is the painting that defined the rest of Wood's career, and it's a painting that really refuses to settle into a single meaning, because it looks like a tribute to rural endurance, or even a satire of small town severity, or a portrait of American repression, or even a
Hmm.
symbol of the stubborn dignity. Um, but he never really fully resolved that tension in the painting. He never quite comes to a strict conclusion as to what the meaning of the painting is. And I think that's one of the reasons why the painting is so, it's so memorable. You know, instead of it just being a portrait of two Midwestern people standing in front of their house, it really has a lot of really interesting and engaging elements in it that that draw you to it and really make you um question it the more you look at it. You interrogate the painting more and more. Not to sound, pretentious, but you do. You like, the more you look at it, the more you see, and the more elements kind of break out at you.
Hmm. And that's, I think, one of the things about this whole project with the Autist Circle. It's like stuff like this is worth pointing out. It's worth noting, and it's like, yeah, oh, it's pretentious. Well, it's only pretentious if you act like you're the only one that's ever seen it in all of your days. Where, oh yes, well, didn't you notice that? And it's like, but pointing it out, it's like, yeah, there's elements in here to draw in the eye and engage the viewer that I just don't think we get often enough now, because a lot of current art, the more mass produced trash,
Right.
there's this, here's just the central figure. Yeah, we had to put a background in there to sell it.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good contrast to modern art too, which I feel a lot of modern art is very anti-intellectual. In that,
Hmm.
it's just the like, and I know that people will defend Rothko, and they'll defend, and we've talked a bit about some of the Rothko works and how some of them aren't just, modern trash, um, or like Pollock, you know,
Don't get me started on that clown.
yeah, where it it's just, it is pretentious, and and I feel like the way they present it is kind of anti-intellectual, in that they are not they're presuming something in the painting that just isn't there, you
Hmm.
know? And so paintings like this, they do make you think once you start looking at them more and more. And seeing the different elements in them, and then like the pitchfork on the overalls really kind of jumped out at me. The mirrored the pitchfork mirrored on the overalls. and then the vertical lines throughout the whole thing. It really does have
Hmm.
a harmony to it, and you know, it's such a fascinating picture to because there are so many different ways you can look at it. Midwestern severity, you know, people who had because this was in the 30s, and so it was right on the lead up to the Depression,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of poverty in the Midwest, and there were a lot of people who were just scraping by farmers, and you could see that uh, those people would you could feel like those people would be kind of humorless and stern because that's the kind of hard life they lived. Um,
Yeah,
but
that
yeah.
there is one thing that is it's starting to bug me now. There's a bit of asymmetry here.
Hmm.
So you've got a possible, church steeple in the background on the left, the lightning rod on the peak of the roof of the house, and if he just put like a weather vane on
On
the
the barn.
barn on the
Yeah.
right, that would have been like perfect symmetry. But no, he screwed it up.
Well, and there is a bit of asymmetry in the whole thing as well, which I think is another interesting part to it. But it is
Mhm.
that asymmetry that is, you know, that's the woman is smaller than the man and kind of thing. And then the house is a bit off center as well, but then the barn kind of offsets that. So, and it's the realism elements are very they're apparent in the people, but then when you look at the trees in the background, and the trees, you know, the circular trees, like round puffy trees in the background, are are a bit more abstract than the
Mhm.
realism presented by the people and the house.
Yeah, it has a lot of that kind of early commercial folk art that you see at the turn of the 19th century,
Yeah,
where there's all just like trees are perfectly round, clouds have a very distinct like three hump shape,
yeah,
and you contrast that with all of the other elements. It's kind of fascinating.
yeah, yeah, and that and you know, I mean, a lot of that stuff was kind of mass produced in a way. You know, this they were kind of boilerplate, and I feel like
Hmm.
his works were anything but that.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like there's kind of a little bit of a mockery or playful, um, kind of like, aha, I see what they've done. It's kind of weird, but I'm gonna run with it because it's also familiar.
Yeah, yeah. Like there is almost a bit of cynicism in this as well, in the representation of the people as so stern and humorless as well.
Hmm.
And again, and I think because this is the 1930s, this is kind of in the wake of the New Deal era of politics. I think that that is the cynicism towards America and American ideals is carried heavily by people who weren't fully on board um, with the Roosevelt vision of the future, um, where you know where the government was going to pay for everything. So
Yeah.
so just with that, we'll move forward because we got some more works to paint talk about, and the next paint picture is really cool. So um, this is these are the models for the painting, which you can see there's not really that much height difference between them, not as much as in the
No, no.
painting, but still, that's his sister and Dr. B.H. McKeeby, a dentist. So,
Although I have to say, goths have certainly changed since the 1930s.
yeah, a lot less eye makeup on these ones than.
Yes, yes.
So American Gothic won third prize at the Art Institute of Chicago's 43rd annual exhibition of American painting and sculpture in late 1930. And after that, his popularity grew tremendously, and he was no longer just a respected Cedar Rapids artist. He was becoming a nationally known artist. And while some people viewed the painting as a dignified image of rural endurance, others felt it unfairly stereotyped Midwesterners, and they didn't know how he made them appear. or he didn't. They didn't like how he made them appear, which was kind of grim and provincial. But again, it's really up for interpretation. And this painting, it really helped lock in his style for his mature works.
Mhm.
He is honoring American rural life and satirizing it, kind of both. And that tension, of whether he was honoring or satirizing the painting would go on to define all of his most famous works. Precise, polished, and staged, a vast departure from his impressionist works, and those some of those works further include Stone City, Iowa, which is this painting here. He painted this in 1930, and Young Corn, this
Hmm.
painting here, and they highlight his kind of mature style, and that we can see very much in like the rounded trees and the stylized hillside and whatnot. Kind of a little surreal in the landscape while trying to maintain a somewhat real feeling to it.
Yeah, it's kind of that weird middle ground where not none of this is natural, but it all feels very natural.
Right. Yeah, and which was kind of a hallmark of regionalism, and that really is he's embracing its Midwestern identity and the regionalism. This is another painting of regionalism. This is from John Stewart Curry. This is called Tourists'
Hmm.
Cabins in 1934. This is the same guy that did the tornado over Kansas. So
Huh.
Wood is really he's doing two things at once because he is becoming the public painter of Iowa, and he is sharpening the more artificial theatrical side of his art. His landscapes become rolling, ordered, and almost toy-like, and his figures become more iconic and mask-like. And his America feels less like a place directly observed and more like a stage where national identity is performed. And with that, we'll move on to the next painting. This is the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, and painted in 1931. It's a oil on masonite, and it measures 30 by 40 inches or 76.2 by 101.6 centimeters. And it's currently located in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And the image depicts the story of Paul Revere as told through Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, Paul Revere's Ride. And I've got a little
Hmm.
excerpt of this, couple of excerpts, and I'm gonna read those here. So listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land, two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm. For the county folk for the county folk to be up and to arm. That's the opening stanzas of it, and then we'll cut to the ending stanza because it's a pretty long poem. And I mean, I can't remember if I had to memorize it, but I know we read it a bunch when I was a kid. We definitely covered it
Oh
when I
yeah,
was in
yeah.
elementary school.
That and oh, was it Johnny Tremaine? I had remember having to read that in elementary school.
Yeah. Johnny Tremaine, I remember that. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock on the door, a word that shall echo forevermore, for born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need. The people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. So that's what we're seeing here. Um, there's the church, obviously, and Paul Revere riding through the town, alerting all the people, and you can see all the lights coming on in the city or in the town, and people waking and stirring because they know the British are coming and they're getting ready to prepare. So it's not a history painting in the old heroic sense, because Paul Revere is not shown as some monumental figure. He's a small writer moving through what looks like a model town. And it almost looks like it was shot through a tilt shift lens in a way, because it does have that
Yeah.
toy-like look to it.
I'm half expecting like Ray Harryhausen to show up and then like
Right?
animate this with stop motion.
Yeah, it's a very idealized, it's a very stylized scene, and it is very emblematic of Grant Wood's style. Um, and the highlight of the painting is the church with the large steeple, and the town is really highlighted by moonlight, and it set in the dark hills. And the bird's eye view looks more like a child's memory rather than an eyewitness account, and it could be a diorama for a school project, honestly. The
Yeah.
and the painting it's patriotic and it's strange at the same time. It's not making a mockery of the scene outright, but it makes the scene seem kind of small. It seems to set it as part of a bedtime story with the moonlight and the church and the village and the horse being so small. And this is often how the story is remembered and how the story is part of the American mythos is passed through poetry, school books, and folklore. So after American Gothic, he really turned from the American face to the American legend. And in this painting, the revolutionary past becomes a miniature stage set. Paul Revere is no longer a grand historical hero. He is a tiny writer moving through a moonlit toy village, carrying a story that Americans already know by heart. He's not painting the revolution itself, he is painting the way the revolution survives as folklore. So again, it's not meant to be, it's not satirizing, but it's not, it's framing it in a way because that's how we remember a lot of this history is kind of like folklore, right? It's not,
Very much so, yeah.
because we don't, people hear it, one if by land, two if by sea, and they don't really think about it in the same sense as like, that was a real gritty fucking war story, right? Like shortly after this shit happened, people died. There was actually, yeah, there was actually a battle. This was our struggle for freedom and our battle for freedom. But so many of the stories of that are told in a way that make it seem like that do make it seem like a myth. The realism of those stories is lost on most people because it's taught to you as a child. It's taught to you as folklore as a child. Of course it's history, but we don't think of it as history in the same way that we think of like, I don't know, the civil rights riots, or Kent
Right,
State.
or the Second World War, where you've got combat footage where you can say, "Yep, that's horrible," or hell, even the American Civil War.
Yeah, exactly. It's remembered as a backdrop with the American identity, which seems pretty salient now as we move towards the 250th anniversary of our country. So,
Yeah,
with that,
it's just
oh, go ahead.
no. It's just it kind of it's that almost cartoonish understanding of history that most people have, and it's not
Yeah,
a knock on most people. It's just like the way history is taught sucks, and we're
yeah,
left with a very diorama-like understanding.
yeah. That's an excellent way to put it. Most people have a very diorama-like understanding of what history looks like. So it's I thought it was an interesting piece for that reason, and so that's why I picked it. Because it really was kind of emblematic of the mood at the time and some of the cynicism. Again, some of the cynicism that was reflected in the American of the time. right? Of the way that people didn't take the history as seriously as they should. So again, and with that said, we'll move into the next painting. And this is Daughters of the Revolution, painted in 1932. This is an oil on masonite. It measures 20 by 40 or 20 by 40 inches or 50.8 by 101.4 centimeters. And this is currently in the Cincinnati Art Museum in Ohio. And the ambiguity of the satire of American Gothic is really dropped in this piece. There's no ambiguity at all. And Wood himself considered this to be clear satire, and that's why he painted it. So in the late 1920s, I didn't put that picture up, I don't think. In the late 1920s in Cedar Rapids, he was painting he designed a stained glass windows for the Veteran Memorial Building, which is this I have pulled up here in Cedar Rapids. Mm-hmm. And in order to get the high quality materials he needed for the work, he sourced the materials from Munich. And the local chapter of the Daughters of the Revolution strongly objected to German craftsmanship being used for a World War I memorial. Which, you know, I can kind of see their point a little bit, but the window wasn't completed in 28 and installed in 29. And of course, the three women that dominate the foreground, they're stiff and self-satisfied, and their faces are not grotesque. They are exaggerated to feel almost mask-like. And the central woman holds a delicate teacup, and the figure on the right peers through round glasses, and the woman on the left carries herself with a frozen, inherited dignity. They're not revolutionaries, and they're people who've inherited the revolution as a social credential. So they call themselves the Daughters of the Revolution, and then they lean on that without actually carrying the spirit forward. So, and the background
I'll just say,
go ahead.
With my experience with the DAR, it's almost comical because it's like, oh well, you know, blah blah blah, and I'm over here. It's like, so my in-laws was George Washington, and the other one was Patrick Henry. Congratulations, ladies! I'm more important than you.
Yeah,
that didn't go over well, but it was very entertaining. You know, it's just the haughty attitude.
Right. That's exactly it. It's the haughty attitude that comes with that. And that's kind of what he was lampooning here. So, of course, to say that the painting in the background is really the central satire. Because, of course, Leutz painted this in Dusseldorf. And he used his German friends as models. And yet it remains one of the most patriotic icons of America. And which we talked about when we talked about Leutz. How this is one of the most enduring photos of American patriotism and one of the foundational myths.
Oh yeah.
And additionally, the woman holding the teacup the woman's holding is an English blue willow teacup, which means the Daughters of the Revolution standing in front of the German painting, drinking from English china. And the women meant to uphold the revolutionary memory are doing so while enjoying the icons of the people they supposedly dislike. Really meaning this painting is not about the revolution. It's a painting about the people who really use the revolution as furniture and as a stepping stool for their own status and their own self-fucking importance. For their own haughty, shitty attitudes. And he was very much satirizing those people in the wake of that. And I think he does a good job. You can just see that woman in the white hair going, smugly, you know, just being a bitch. They look like a bunch of snotty, snooty bitches. who you could see, and like you said, you've met people from the DAR, and they're like, they're wearing that as a costume. They're wearing their status of the daughters who of or descendants of people who
Of
fought
the
for our
men
freedom.
who sacrificed everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and in a way, just the whole concept of the daughters of the revolution is kind of smug and self-satisfying. Um, because yeah, they're still the daughters. They didn't actually fight. They wouldn't have fought then. Like they can carry on the memory for sure. But most of them don't carry on the memory in the spirit in which it was made. They carry it on in a way that elevates them above you. And that's really what this is kind of lampooning. So, after the success of his previous works, he's now seen as one of the central figures of the regionalist movement. In 1932, he helped establish the Stone City Art Colony along with Edward Beatty Rowan, who painted this. This is Flowers Still Life, painted in 1930. Very much like a loose impressionist watercolor style. And Beatty was the former art director of the Little Gallery in Cedar Rapids, and along with Adrian Dornbush, who was the former director of the Flint Flint Institute of Art, and was a Little Gallery art instructor. And he painted this one. This is Jerry, Man in the Green Shirt, in 1932. The Stone City Art Colony was an attempt to establish an artist colony outside of the authority of New York and Paris or California art communities. And the colony itself was short-lived, but the idea behind it mattered because Wood wanted to prove that Iowa was not a cultural backwater, that it could be a center of artistic production in its own right. In 1932, Wood was named the director of the Public Works of Art Project, which was a short-lived federal relief program, a New Deal program. Because of the local PWAP office operated out of the University of Iowa, he was extended an appointment to the faculty while he directed a major mural project at Iowa State University in Ames. In 1935, he married Sarah Sherman Woods, this lady here, who looks a lot older than him, but was in fact only 7 years his senior. And in that same year,
Wow,
he
she must
moves
have had
to
a hard life.
Yeah. So that same year, he moves into 1142 East Court Street, which is now known as the Oaks Wood House in Iowa City. And he restored it. He designed furniture for it. He altered the landscaping. And really, he treated this work like its own, or this house like it was his own work of art. And he spent a lot of time on it. And now it is I believe it's a museum. And in 1939, so he had a short-lived marriage. Wood and Maxon divorced, and he produced the next painting, which is the Fable, or Parson Weems Fable. It's oil on canvas, and it measures 38 and 5/8 by 50 and 1/8 inches, or 97.5 by 127.3 centimeters. And this is currently located in the Ammon Carter Museum of American Art in Fort Worth, Texas, which is the same place where a lot of Charles Marion Russell's works are. And it's also the same place where some of Albert Bierstadt's paintings are. And this painting is very literally Wood pulling the curtain back on the American myth. Of course, the scene is iconic, the American myth of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, where his father confronts him and he confesses that he cannot tell a lie. Of course, we've all heard that story as well. And the man in the foreground is Mason Locke Parson Weems, who was an early Washington biographer, and he helped popularize the cherry tree story after Washington's death. And Wood places him in front of a red stage curtain, kind of like a narrator stepping out to introduce a moral lesson. And the curtain shows that the story is being presented as theater, and it's as the performance of the fable.
You know, this reminds me a little bit, and it's maybe if nobody else is familiar, the Night Gallery with Rod Serling.
Oh yeah, yeah. That Rod Serling is the guy who did the Twilight Zone, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, but he did another series later, the Night Gallery, which
yeah.
featured made-up pieces of art for the story.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Fits in here. So the one thing that's kind of really weird, or one of the weirder things, is that the young Washington he's portrayed in a strange way. He's got the face we're all familiar with, but on a child's body, and we're really leaving no doubt who we're talking about. You can see it's George Washington's head from the quarter, kind of posted onto a kid's face or a kid's body, of course, pointing at the axe.
That is so weird.
I know. And he's painting Washington, the national symbol, inserted backwards into childhood, not necessarily George Washington as a child. And Augustine Washington points towards the damaged cherry tree while the tiny boy holds the hatchet. And the house and the lawn and the curtain, the cherry tree, and the simplified background all feel staged and artificial. Much like the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, it's not history as it happened. It's history as Americans remember it after it has been cleaned up, moralized, and repeated, for generations. And the red brick house in the background is modeled after his own Iowa home, the one we just looked at. You can definitely see the similarities between the two with the shutters on everything. Of course, there's fewer windows, but the red brick with the star over the door, and this may be the side view of it. And he's filtering it through his own Midwestern stage set. The founding myth is relocated in spirit into Grant Wood's constructed America. And he's not really painting the cherry tree
somebody
story.
forgot to put the farm equipment away.
Yeah.
Deep cut if you know what we're talking about. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. He's not painting the cherry tree story per se. He's painting the invention of the cherry tree story. This is, of course, Parson Weems pulling back the curtain saying, hey, look at this story I invented, that is going to become foundational to American myth. Oh, okay, so by the guy had a lot of really great photographs, and I think I put a lot of them in here because I feel like he would be a very nice and genuine dude to talk to. He has that kind of humble, grandfatherly look to him, or Radar O'Reilly look to him. Someone who seems pretty likable. So by 1940, the Depression era world was giving way to war and institutional conflict. And Woods' life was no different. The 1930s world of cynicism that had made regionalism such a powerful movement was giving way to pre-war sentiment. The country was moving away from small town life to a more urgent industrial and militarized mood. His marriage had ended in divorce in the previous year, and his tenure at the University of Iowa was becoming troubled. He joined the university in 1934 and became a full professor in 1939, but it was controversial amongst the faculty because he did not have a bachelor's degree or other papered qualifications. And we'll talk more about that again. In 1940 to 1941, he took a leave of absence from his position at the university amidst a disagreement with his fellow faculty members and department heads. And at the same time, a reporter began investigations into his personal life, which he was accused of an inappropriate relationship with his publicist. And he remained highly productive during that time, working on lithographs and book illustrations, as well as mentoring young artists at his Iowa City home. And during that time, he was commissioned to create a painting in connection with John Ford's film, The Long Voyage Home, which is something they don't do anymore. But this guy went out and had one of the publicists for this film, Walter Wagner. He was one of the producers. He commissioned a bunch of different artists, 9 different artists, to paint paintings based on the movie. And of course, the movie features John Wayne and Thomas Mitchell, who is this guy standing next to John Wayne. This guy here, you can see he's got the hat. And then Ian Hunter. And this is a scene from the movie with Ian Hunter, who is, I think the guy, I think he's this guy here, right? Right at the second to the right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, some of the images got a little messed up on this end, but
oh, yeah, it's hard to. But so this leads us into our next painting, and this is the painting he did for that, and you can see it's kind of an exaggerated and differently staged version of that painting. And this is oil on wood, of course, painted in 1940, and it measures 24 by 5 inches or 61 by 42.7 inches. It says 427 centimeters, but that's not right. 42.7 centimeters. I don't think that's right either. Anyhow, and it's currently in the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain, Connecticut. And again, like I said, this painting is connected to the John Ford 1940s film Long Voyage Home, which is a drama adapted from Eugene O'Neill's Sea Plays. During the production, Walter Wagner, the producer, hired 9 prominent American artists, including Grant Wood, to create paintings inspired by the film, and the resulting works toured American museums after being displayed at the Associated Artists American Artists Galleries in New York. So in sticking with his performance theme, he's painting the performance from performance. He's not looking at the actual tavern scene from life. It's really a translation of a cinematic scene into his own theatrical language. And while the original scene seems very sincere, Wood's recreation is somewhat exaggerated. The bodies are elongated and the faces are almost a bit of a caricature. So, and the staging is very different too. Of course, it's tightened up to better fit everybody into frame and be able to make the characters as large as they are. Otherwise, if you look back at the original stage of it, the characters are all very spread out, which is understandable. If you were at a bar, you would be very spread out. And I haven't seen this film, but I'm probably going to have to watch it one of these days. So in American Gothic, America posed in front of a farmhouse, and in The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, America became a moonlit legend. And of course, in Daughters of a Revolution, patriotism became a social costume. And in Parson Weems' Fables, the national virtue became a staged child story. And in Sentimental Ballad, American myth becomes a song, communal and nostalgic, slightly ridiculous, but still deeply human. And moving on to the last page here. So by the time Wood had painted his last painting, he was one of the most famous American artists alive at the time. And while regionalism had flourished during the Depression era, the changing attitude of the 40s, the national attitudes were dramatically changing. And between Wood's failed marriage and several attempts by colleagues to discredit both his teaching style and his reputation, he had become somewhat bitter. He clashed with the modernist faculty at the University of Iowa, including the department chair, Lester Longman, this gentleman here. And in 1941, despite his lack of formal credentials, Wood was made a full professor and removed from Longman's supervision. But that fall
Hmm.
of that same year, his health began to worsen. And on February 12th in 1942, Grant Wood passed away from an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer on the day before his 51st birthday in Iowa City, Iowa. His estate was passed down to his sister, Nan Grant Wood, who he painted this portrait of, as well as, the American Gothic portrait. But she passed away in 1990, and everything was passed to the Fig Museum, I'm not sure how to say that one. This is an art museum in Davenport, Iowa.
Ew.
And in 1943, during World War II, a Liberty ship was commissioned by the United States as the SS Grant Wood, which sailed until it was scrapped in 1970. And then in 1978, his home was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So, from American Gothic to the Sentimental Ballad, Grant Wood's paintings, they ask a deceptively simple question. When America looks at itself, how much of what it sees is real, and how much is a story that has learned to that it's learned to perform?
Hmm.
So, just a few things of note. When you go look up the scholarly sources on this, they're really some of them are mixed, because of course everywhere you would assume, or everywhere that could possibly presume for a political means that he was a closeted homosexual will say so. Of course, Wikipedia will state it as fact. The University of Iowa will state it as fact, but it's not confirmed in most places. Of course,
Hmm.
that's what some of the accusations were that were levied against him, particularly from reporters. But again,
Mhm.
he was married for a short period of time. Now, whether that was an act or not, it may be up for discussion. But
Right, yeah, I mean, it could be one of those, lavender marriages or whatever the hell those
yeah,
things were called back in the
yeah,
turn of the century, but at the same time, it's like most of these artists are, if they're flagrantly homosexual, they're going out and they're doing whatever the hell they want to do. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm going to be sneaky about it.
yeah. Well, and I could understand in the Midwest during the 30s and 40s that it obviously would not be popular, to be a homosexual. Of course, in the early, in the early half of American history, it was not seen favorably. It was something that could discredit someone greatly. But but at the same time, there's such a propensity for modern scholars to attribute homosexuality to someone who may not have been a stereotypically masculine figure,
Hmm.
right? They make a lot of assumptions and paint a lot of images that don't necessarily exist. Um, and that's just again, like I said, the propensity of the modern academia.
Oh yeah,
Um,
well, it's obvious, wouldn't, you know, it's like, oh yeah, Abe Lincoln, he must have been gay because he talked about sleeping with a guy in another bed, and it's like, well, considering that was 160 years ago, people usually shared beds. They were
yeah,
strangers even at the time. It was just the way things were.
right. Yeah, and so in by the same token that no two same-sex characters can just be friends in modern media,
Mhm.
there has to be a gay subtone to everything. Um, I believe that carries backwards through history when they look at shit like that. They look at people like Lincoln, they look at people like Wood. They attribute a motive or a sexuality to them, which just is not correct. So whether he was or wasn't uh, gay is really kind of academic and really immaterial to his work in general. Um, and I feel I feel like by injecting that into every one of his fucking biographies, they're really just pushing their own political agenda. So, so with that said, I think that Grant Wood did a really great job of capturing the American um, post post New Deal post New Deal sentiment of America, where there was a deeply cynical root in America because so many people felt the country was moving in the wrong direction under the kind of socialist tendencies of FDR.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of people felt like the people that were hyper patriotic as a result of the introduction of socialism into our country were not as genuine with their love for the country as much as they were for their love of their own ideals. So with that, that's all I got. So um, that's Grant Wood. And next week, we should be joined by a special guest. I think we're going to have 3 of 12 with us next week.
Excellent.
And we are going to be talking about H.R. Geiger. So a very modern turn from where we've been, but it should be a great episode. He was an interesting person, and I believe he created some really fantastic art, and his influence on modern sci-fi, which is one of my favorite things, can't possibly be understated. So, as much as people like Hopper had an influence on America's cinematography, Geiger had that kind of influence on American art and pop culture. So, join us then next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And thank you for joining us today, folks. And that's all I got. So, have a good one.
Indeed, old chum. Go out and look at some art.
That's right. Bye, folks.
Cheers.